You don't know her. You have never met her. You don't know her last name, her job, whether she is happy, whether any of what she posts is real. And yet, at some point in the last 48 hours, you spent a non-trivial amount of time on her profile, scrolling back through months of her life, looking at photos of her holiday, her relationship, her apartment, her body, her friends' faces. You didn't intend to. You didn't open the app to look at her specifically. You just ended up there, carried by the current of the feed, or by a tap that followed a tag that followed a suggested account. And somewhere in the scroll, you crossed the line between passive consumption and something that felt, if you're honest, a little like surveillance. And then you closed the app and thought about something else, or tried to. This behavior has a name. Psychologists and media researchers call it digital voyeurism, the compulsive, often unconscious observation of other people's curated lives through social media. And the reason you do it is not boredom, not nosiness, not a character flaw. It is a set of neurological and evolutionary mechanisms so deeply embedded in human psychology that the platforms that profit from them were able to predict and exploit them before most researchers had even begun to study them. This video is about those mechanisms, why your brain is drawn to observing strangers, what it is actually looking for, what it costs you, and why the product you think you're consuming for free is something considerably more valuable than the platform is letting on. The human code take. The standard conversation about social media and voyeurism focuses on comparison. You look at other people's lives, you feel inadequate, you feel bad. That framing is accurate but incomplete, and it misses the more disturbing insight. The problem with digital voyeurism is not primarily that it makes you feel bad about yourself. The problem is that it produces a neurological experience of social connection and social information gathering that your brain processes as real, while delivering none of the actual relational content that would make that connection meaningful. You feel like you know people you have never spoken to. You feel socially engaged while becoming more socially isolated. You feel informed about human lives while learning almost nothing true about any of them. The harm is not the bad feeling. The harm is the false satisfaction. The way digital voyeurism relieves the pressure to seek genuine connection precisely enough that you stop seeking it. Credibility statement. The scientific framework for this video draws on several distinct research traditions that converge on the same phenomenon from different angles. From evolutionary psychology, the work on social surveillance, status monitoring, and the adaptive value of attending closely to the behavior of group members, particularly high-status or reproductively relevant individuals. From neuroscience, the dopaminergic reward circuitry literature, specifically research on variable ratio reinforcement schedules and their relationship to compulsive behavior. From social psychology, Leon Festinger's social comparison theory and its extensions into social media contexts, particularly the research of Vogel, Rose, and colleagues on the specific effects of upward social comparison on social platforms. And from clinical and media psychology, the emerging literature on parasocial relationships, FOMO, fear of missing out, and what researchers including Keith Hampton at Michigan State University have documented about the relationship between passive social media consumption and well-being. The picture that emerges is not one of simple addiction or simple narcissism. It is something more architecturally interesting and considerably more difficult to resist once you understand its structure. Point 1. The evolutionary root. Why your brain was built for this. To understand digital voyeurism, you need to start where all productive discussions of compulsive human behavior should start, with the adaptive problem the behavior originally solved. Human beings evolved in small, stable social groups, typically between 50 and 150 individuals, in what anthropologist Robin Dunbar has estimated as the cognitively manageable social group size for our species. In that environment, attending carefully to what other people were doing, who was rising in status and who was falling, who was forming alliances with whom, who had resources and who didn't, who was a reliable partner and who was a defector. This was not idle curiosity. It was mission-critical information processing. Your social position within the group determined your access to food, protection, mating opportunities, and cooperative support. The person who was oblivious to the social dynamics around them was the person who got outcompeted, excluded, or exploited. The person who attended closely, who tracked the group's shifting landscape of relationships, alliances, and reputations, was the person who could navigate it effectively. Your brain evolved to be a social surveillance machine. It dedicates more neural real estate to processing social information, faces, status signals, relationship dynamics, emotional states of others, than to almost any other domain of perception. The fusiform face area processes faces with extraordinary speed and priority. The temporoparietal junction tracks the mental states and intentions of others automatically. The medial prefrontal cortex maintains a running model of the social environment and your position within it. These systems did not evolve for Instagram. They evolved for a social environment in which closely monitoring the people around you had direct survival consequences. But they cannot distinguish between the social environment they evolved for and the one you are presenting them with when you open a social media app. They register a feed of faces, status signals, relationship updates, and social dynamics. And they do exactly what they were built to do. They attend, they process, they track, compulsively, automatically, with the priority of a system that has been told this information is survival relevant. The platform did not create your voyeuristic impulse. It found it already there, ancient, powerful, and desperately in need of an updated operating environment, and built a product around it. Point 2. The dopamine loop. How the scroll was engineered to be unfinishable. The neural mechanism most directly responsible for the compulsive quality of social media scrolling is the brain's dopaminergic reward system. Specifically, the way that system responds to variable, unpredictable rewards. B.F. Skinner established the foundational finding in the 1950s. Of all possible reward schedules, the one that produces the most persistent compulsive behavior is the variable ratio schedule, where rewards arrive unpredictably, at random intervals, with no way to know when the next one will come. This is the schedule that keeps a gambler at the slot machine long after any rational calculation of expected return would suggest stopping. The unpredictability is not incidental to the compulsion. It is the source of it. When you scroll a social media feed, you are engaging with a variable ratio reward schedule that has been designed deliberately by teams of engineers and behavioral scientists to be maximally effective at producing exactly this kind of compulsive engagement. The rewards are social information, a post that makes you laugh, a photo that provokes envy, a story that triggers a comparison, a piece of news that produces anxiety, a glimpse of someone's life that generates a momentary sense of connection or superiority or longing. The rewards are real enough to produce genuine neurological responses, and they arrive unpredictably. You don't know whether the next post will be rewarding or boring. Your brain, running its ancient reward detection circuitry, registers this unpredictability as a reason to keep going. One more scroll, one more post. The next one might be the interesting one. What makes this particularly difficult to resist is that the dopamine response is not triggered primarily by the reward itself. It is triggered by the anticipation of a possible reward. The neurologist Wolfram Schultz documented this in primate studies. Dopamine neurons fire most strongly, not when the reward arrives, but when a cue that predicts a possible reward appears. The scroll itself, the gesture of moving to the next item, is a cue that predicts a possible reward, which means the dopamine response is firing with every scroll, not just when the content is interesting. You are not scrolling because the content is compelling. You are scrolling because the act of scrolling releases dopamine in anticipation of content that might be compelling. The distinction matters enormously because it means the compulsion is not responsive to the quality of what you find. You can scroll through an hour of content you don't care about and still not feel the impulse to stop, because the impulse is being generated by the mechanism, not by the material. Rehook. 2-min mark. I want to stop here and name something that I think most conversations about social media addiction carefully avoid, because it implicates not just the platforms, but something about what we are looking for in other people's lives. When you land on a stranger's profile and scroll back through months of their posts, you are not passively consuming content. You are gathering intelligence. You are running exactly the same social surveillance process your ancestors ran when they tried to understand where someone stood in the group hierarchy, what their relationships looked like, whether they were a threat or a resource or a potential ally. The target is a stranger on the internet instead of a fellow tribe member. But the cognitive process is identical, and here is what that means. The discomfort you feel when you catch yourself doing it, the slight guilt, the sense of having been somewhere you shouldn't, is not neurotic. It is accurate, because what you are doing is a form of social monitoring that the person being observed has not consented to. They posted publicly, but they did not consent to being studied. And somewhere in your nervous system, you know the difference. Point 3. Social comparison. What you are actually hunting for. In the scroll. Leon Festinger's social comparison theory, introduced in 1954, proposed that humans have a fundamental drive to evaluate their own abilities, opinions, and life circumstances by comparing themselves to others. In the absence of objective standards, other people become the reference points by which we determine whether we are doing well or badly, whether we are on track or behind, whether we are living correctly or incorrectly. This drive is not vanity, it is an information gathering system. In a social environment where your position relative to others directly affected your access to resources and opportunities, knowing how you compared, accurately and continuously, was genuinely useful. The person with no sense of their own relative standing was the person who missed social opportunities or misjudged threats. Social media presents this ancient social comparison system with an unprecedented volume and density of comparison data, and data that is systematically skewed in a specific direction. The research by Nicole Vogel and Rose and colleagues, published in the journal Psychology of Popular Media Culture, documented what they called the upward social comparison effect on social media. When people scroll through feeds populated with curated, high-quality representations of other people's lives, their relationships, their bodies, their achievements, their experiences, the predominant comparison direction is upward. Almost everyone on social media is presenting a version of their life that is better, more interesting, more beautiful, and more successful than average. Which means almost everyone who scrolls is comparing themselves to a sample of human experience that is not representative, that is systematically biased toward the positive, and that makes their own ordinary, unfiltered life look inadequate by comparison. The mechanism that makes this particularly difficult to resist is that the comparison process is largely automatic. You do not consciously decide to compare yourself to the person whose holiday photos you are looking at. The comparison happens below awareness, as an output of the social monitoring systems running in your medial prefrontal cortex. You arrive at the feeling, a vague dissatisfaction, a sense of falling short, a restless longing for something different. Without having consciously engaged in any comparison process at all, the feeling seems to come from nowhere. It came from the scroll. And here is the specific cruelty of digital voyeurism as a comparison mechanism. Unlike comparison with people in your physical environment, whose ordinariness you can observe alongside their highlights, social media comparison is almost entirely with people's curated best moments. You are comparing your behind the scenes to their highlight reel, your anxiety to their confidence, your ordinary Tuesday to their holiday in Santorini. The comparison is structurally designed to make you feel behind. Not because you are, because the sample you are comparing yourself to is not random. It is the best version of multiple people's best moments, arranged into a continuous stream presented as ordinary life. Point 4. Parasocial intimacy. The relationship that costs nothing and delivers less. In 1956, sociologists Donald Horton and Richard Wohl introduced a concept that has since become one of the most important frameworks in media psychology: the parasocial relationship. A parasocial relationship is a one-sided relationship in which one party, the audience member, the fan, the viewer, develops a sense of intimacy, familiarity, and emotional investment in another person. The media figure, the celebrity, the influencer, who is entirely unaware of their existence. Horton and Wohl's original work focused on television personalities, chat show hosts, news anchors, characters in serialized dramas, who addressed the camera directly and created, through their constant presence in living rooms, a sense of personal familiarity that felt like genuine relationship. They were always there. They always greeted you. They spoke in a personal, conversational register. They felt like people you knew. Social media has extended this phenomenon far beyond celebrities and into the architecture of everyday online behavior. When you follow someone on Instagram, not a famous person, just a person whose posts you find interesting, whose life you have been watching for months or years, you develop a parasocial relationship with them. You know things about them. You recognize their friends, their aesthetic preferences, the places they frequent, the topics they care about, the texture of their daily life as they choose to present it. You feel you know them. And the neurological correlates of this feeling are real. The same brain regions that process genuine social familiarity are activated by parasocial familiarity. The feeling is not a metaphor. It registers in the brain as a genuine social bond. But it is not a genuine social bond. The person you feel you know has no corresponding knowledge of you. The emotional investment is entirely unilateral. The information flow is entirely one-directional. You have access to a curated, edited, strategically selected version of their life, the version they have chosen to make visible, and you have constructed, from that selection, a mental model of a person who does not fully correspond to any real individual. Researcher Xian Zhao at the University of Toronto and colleagues have documented that parasocial relationships on social media are associated with reduced investment in real-world relationships. That the social satisfaction produced by parasocial engagement partially substitutes for, rather than supplementing, the motivation to seek genuine social connection. You feel less lonely after scrolling through someone's profile, but you are not less lonely. You are less motivated to address the loneliness through the only means that would actually resolve it. This is the specific mechanism through which digital voyeurism trades focus for a curated, hollow sense of belonging. The belonging feels real. The hollowness only becomes apparent when the phone is put down and the real social environment reasserts itself. Point 5. The spotlight effect reversed. Why nobody is watching you back. There is a well-documented psychological phenomenon called the spotlight effect, the tendency to overestimate how much other people notice and remember your behavior, appearance, and mistakes. The name captures the subjective experience, the sense of being in a spotlight, of your actions being observed and evaluated by an attentive audience. Research by Thomas Gilovich and colleagues at Cornell University established that people consistently overestimate the degree to which they are the object of others' attention. When participants entered a room wearing an embarrassing t-shirt, they estimated that far more people had noticed it than actually had. When they made an error in a group setting, they estimated far greater attention to the error than observers reported. The spotlight effect exists because humans are self-centered perceptual systems. not in the moral sense, but in the literal sense that our own experience is the center of our perceptual field, and we tend to project that centrality outward, assuming we occupy as central a position in others' awareness as we do in our own. Digital voyeurism reveals the exact inverse of this phenomenon. While you are watching strangers, you are operating under the implicit assumption that nobody is watching you. You are the observer, not the observed. The surveillance is unilateral. You are in the dark, looking through the window, while the people inside go about their lives under the impression that they are not being closely studied by someone they have never met. But here is the inversion that should give you pause. While you are scrolling through someone's profile with the invisible confidence of someone who believes they are unobserved, someone else is scrolling through yours with the same invisible confidence, looking at your photos, your captions, your choices, your life as you have presented it, gathering social intelligence about you with the same compulsive, automatic thoroughness with which you are gathering it about others. You are simultaneously the voyeur and the subject, the watcher and the watched, and neither role is comfortable once you hold both in mind at the same time. This dual position illuminates something important about social media's fundamental architecture. It is a system in which everyone is performing for an audience they cannot see, while watching a performance they are not supposed to scrutinize too closely. The voyeurism is mutual. The discomfort with that mutuality is also mutual. And the solution most people arrive at, to not think about it directly, is precisely the solution the platform is designed to facilitate. Point 6. What is actually being exchanged and how to reclaim it. Let's name what is happening in the transaction of digital voyeurism clearly, because it is the clarity that makes the alternative feel genuinely possible. When you spend 40 minutes scrolling through a feed populated by strangers' curated lives, several things are being exchanged. You give your attention, the most finite, non-renewable resource you possess. You give your neurological reward system, which is being trained with every scroll to expect social information in the format the platform delivers it, which makes authentic social environments feel by comparison slow, ambiguous, and unrewarding. And you give the interpretive space in which genuine insight, genuine rest, and genuine connection might otherwise have happened. What you receive in return is a neurological simulation of social engagement that is real enough to satisfy the surface-level need, while failing to address its underlying cause. A dopaminergic experience of social monitoring that produces no actual social intelligence about anyone. A sense of connection to people who do not know you exist. And a comparison sample so systematically skewed toward highlight reel moments that continued exposure to it cannot produce anything other than the specific dissatisfaction it was designed to relieve. Just insufficiently, just enough to make you scroll again. The platform's business model depends on this insufficiency. An app that genuinely satisfied your social needs would be an app you put down. An app that relieves enough social discomfort to prevent you from seeking genuine connection, while not relieving it enough to stop you scrolling, is an app you use for 4 hours a day. Research by Keith Hampton at Michigan State University found that passive consumption of social media, scrolling, observing, watching others' content without interacting, is consistently associated with increased loneliness, decreased well-being, and decreased sense of social support. Active social media use, commenting, direct messaging, genuine back-and-forth interaction shows a much weaker negative effect, and in some contexts, a mildly positive one. The variable that matters is not screen time. It is the direction of the social information flow. Consuming social information about others without reciprocal exchange is, neurologically and psychologically, a fundamentally different activity from genuine social engagement. And the brain, after a period of passive consumption, registers the difference, not as boredom or dissatisfaction with the content, but as a diffuse, sourceless loneliness that the next scroll is perfectly positioned to temporarily relieve. What interrupts this cycle is not willpower. Research on behavior change is consistent that resisting compulsive behavior through willpower alone is the least effective strategy, because it leaves the underlying need unaddressed and the environmental cue structure intact. What actually interrupts it is substitution of the underlying need with a different, more genuinely satisfying source. The need underneath digital voyeurism is real. You are a social animal who evolved to monitor other people's lives closely, to gather social intelligence continuously, to feel connected and informed about the people around you. That need does not go away when you put the phone down. It redirects. And the question is only whether it redirects towards social experiences that actually address it. Conversation, attention, genuine presence with other people, or toward another round of the same insufficient substitute. The most useful intervention is not use your phone less. It is notice what you are reaching for when you reach for your phone. Are you looking for entertainment, stimulation, distraction from something uncomfortable, social connection, information, and then asking, is this going to provide the actual thing or the simulation of it that I am going to need to repeat in 20 minutes? That question and that simple gap between the impulse and the action is where the behavior can actually be changed. Not through resolution or restriction, but through honest recognition of what you are actually doing when you do it. You are not scrolling through strangers' lives. You are looking for something, and the most important step is knowing what. Call to action. This week, I want you to try one specific thing. The next time you find yourself on someone's profile, someone you don't know personally, someone you've been scrolling through for longer than you consciously intended, stop before you close the app and ask yourself 3 questions. First, what was I looking for when I got here? Not the surface answer, not I was just browsing. The actual answer. Was I bored, lonely, anxious about something, looking for evidence that my life measures up, looking for evidence that it doesn't? Second, did I find it? Did this profile, this scroll, this 20 minutes of looking at a stranger's life actually address whatever I was looking for? Third, what would? If what I was actually looking for is real social connection, real social information, real relief from loneliness or comparison anxiety, what would actually provide that if I gave myself permission to go get it? You don't have to answer these questions perfectly. You don't have to immediately restructure your relationship with your phone. Just the practice of asking them, of introducing any gap between the impulse and the scroll, begins to restore the thing digital voyeurism most thoroughly dismantles, your own agency as the person deciding where your attention goes. Your attention is not just valuable to the platforms that monetize it. It is the medium in which your actual life takes place. Every hour spent watching strangers live theirs is an hour that is not being spent generating the content of your own. Subscribe to the Human Code. We go here every week, and next week, we are going somewhere equally uncomfortable. See you there.